Good day, everyone, and welcome to All the Feels. My name is Patricia Angelin, and what you see in front of you right now is a whiteboard that I made up for a workshop I did at Alba Technique, quite a while ago. And at the top, which you can't see, so I'll pan up, it says, "Observation is all," which is the first of the memes that Alba Technique ever put out. And it's a quote from myself. And I was trying to explain to the students in the Alba emoting class that, that they needed to observe themselves and without judgment and get out of that left brain and into the right brain and that sort of thing. So I said, observation is all, not to be critical of the self. And so moving down in sort of an orangey red, there is know thyself. And that is, I think, if I had to say, what is your motto, Pat? I would say it is know thyself, which of course is a diktat of Socrates. I was going to say the late, great Socrates. Yeah, late, 2,500 years ago, Pat. But this is, what Aristotle was listening to and what Plato was listening to and the Neoplatonists, etc. And philosophers, I think, too, through the last ages of the Western world. Know thyself. It's extremely important in dealing with our feelings, with all the feels. Knowing yourself and your own emotional reactivity is so important. And it's ultimately what gives you self-control in every situation you're in. Not because you're repressing feelings. No, I'm against repressing. But suppressing is necessary. Suppressing, shelving things, as I like to say, to deal with later and to get, some therapeutic help to deal with whatever. That's healthy. And it's very, very important because if we didn't suppress some of our immediate limbic reactivity in our brain and chemically in our bodies, we would become completely uncivilized, and none of us wants that, although sometimes we feel like we do. And then if we track down in what you're looking at to see breathe mindfully, that is, of course, something that many people are talking about now at this point in history, and is a very, very good thing. But one can't really breathe mindfully if one doesn't have an awful lot of information. And it is that information for your body and your mind that is what I do at Alba Technique and what the teachers I'm training will be doing, and what Mr. Ron Burton of Alba Technique also does, and the rest of my magnificent team, Katie Matucci and Alex Holbrook, and the team in Ireland and in Colorado, etc. So Bella O'Brien as well, and Mr. Eddie McCarthy. So I will now turn this around, if I can see where it's supposed to be, up in my left-hand corner. Where is it? Oh, it's moved. Here we are. All right, technical difficulties are dealt with. I have a couple of things to share with you today that they're not direct questions from other questioners. It is more observation is all. But before that, I want to share with you all something that just happened just before I logged on, which was just delightful to me and to my assistant Katie. And we were trying to do something online, and I looked at one of the passwords, and we had the line with a dot underneath it. Now, if you could mentally picture the line with a dot underneath it at the end of a sentence, that, of course, is a particular thing. A lot of us use it. Some of us supposedly use it too much. To say excitement and yes, and so I was going, before I turned on to this call, I was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with a bunch of stuff, with problems in my apartment building here in New York, with neighbors, with young neighbors, who, etc. So I was really going in a number of directions, and I looked at that and had to report it to Katie because I was looking at it, you know, in a book of passwords. And I said, and the symbol for the symbol for emphasis. And naturally enough, she looks at me and she goes, the symbol for emphasis, Pat? Pat, I don't know what you mean. And I went, I can't think of the right word for it. What is it called? And I showed it to her like I just showed it to you. And she said, Pat, exclamation point? I said, yes, exclamation point. And we both started to, as I like to say, laugh at me a great deal. So I invite you all to laugh at me a great deal, because those of you who have been on, have looked at my things before, are aware that this, all the feels, is designed to be very off the cuff. I'm not spewing numbers at you. I'm not, it's like a conversation, I'm hoping, as it develops, that we're having together about feelings, about emotions, about our personal human social interactions and how we can deal with them for the good of our own bodies and minds and the good of the person with whom we are interacting, and then spiraling out from that to the rest of the world. And that is my hope for this 1 week. Like today, we're on Facebook Live, and next week we will be on Instagram Live, and thus we'll build up a body together of questions getting answered and in specific situations. So I wanted to share with you my joy. And I was so relieved that I had a sense of humor about myself, and that's such a help, as we know. Finding something to laugh about. A lot of the comic books that developed, and graphic novels that have continued to develop through the 20th century into the 21st, on all different subjects, including Shakespeare stories, you know, for new generations that were developing in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and different graphic styles, and, you know, all fun, ultimately leading to things like Comic-Con, you know, and video games and all of this. So it's all quite wonderful, but there are different ways of looking at the world and of helping other people engage the world. And, you know, with comic books, and become heroic and figure out what heroism is in each generation. And I'm thinking that at the current time, what can be heroic is not allowing oneself, trying to think of the right way to say this, not allowing my emotional reactivity to, which will come up, of course, like if somebody comes at me and they're angry, like we talked about last week, somebody harasses me, or harasses, as they say in the United States, me when I'm getting my vaccine, because this individual looked at me and thought that I was jumping a line, that I was jumping a queue, which was not the fact. That was not what was happening. And I could see why this person thought that I was, but it was not what was happening. It wasn't accurate. So I just had to take it. But her anger at me, of course it got into me. But I did not answer in kind. So I was the one who was able to be in control of my mind, my body, my own brain's limbic activity, resulting in the chemical drops into my neurobiome, so that I did not say anything and I did not do anything to exacerbate a difficult situation in a public place, in a vaccine place, in a difficult time toward the end of a world pandemic. You get the idea. And I talked about that last week on Instagram Live a little bit, because it was so fresh. It happened right before I came to meet all of you and to record this. So if any of you feel like looking at it, you could look at Alba Technique on YouTube, and I would be very grateful if you would subscribe to that. I even if you never look at it again, I would be grateful to you if you would do so. So that was last week, and the recovery of one's sense of humor, which can be very, very difficult if one is, for any reason whatsoever, low in energy. It can be just very difficult to find anything humorous at all. And in the early generations, as I was to loop back around to that, my grandfather, for example, who would have been very active in the 1920s and the 1930s, and every single day he would look at the physical newspaper and the comics. They would have an entire page in most newspapers in most towns of syndicated three-cell and some little stories that were ongoing in the comic book section. First thing he looked at every single morning. And I remember asking him once, "What are you doing, Grandpa?" And he said, "I am looking for the Chuckles." And so I said to my mother, "Why is Grandpa looking for Chuckles?" And she sighed. I think she was having a bad day. She said, "Sometimes, dear, it's difficult to laugh. If you have a lot of problems, or you're sick, or like Grandpa, you're old and have a rheumatoid arthritic hip, and it hurts you all the time, you need to look. You need to try to find reasons to laugh, even a little bit. Something that lifts your spirits." So that's what Grandpa means when he says he's looking for the Chuckles. And that stayed with me. I probably was about 8 years old at the time. And as I've gotten older and faced more and more of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as we all do as we go through life, and we all shoulder our own burdens, or try to as best as we can, and deal with all of the feelings that we have and all the feelings that the other people are having, that they're throwing at us all too frequently, and trying not to do damage to oneself or to the other in our emotional reactivity, despite all our feelings. So at any rate, I was just very happy because I was dealing with a lot of problems that Katie was able to point out my own ridiculousness to me, and both she and I were able to have a laugh about this. So that was wonderful. Everybody, look for the Chuckles. Look for anything to uplift you. Look for that which is good, what is beautiful, what is true, the ways you can help anyone, however small. And most frequently today, it's just smile at somebody whose burdens you do not know, and whose burdens you will not know, and whose burdens are not yours to know because you couldn't help with them. But what you can do behind your mask is you can go, or say, "Good afternoon," and they'll look at you like, and and scurry away, or go, "Good afternoon," or "Hi." I've had people go like that, like, somebody's actually looked at me. Somebody's actually recognized me as a human being. We've been in isolation psychologically and sometimes physically in our lockdowns for so long. So any kindness on even the smallest little level that we can offer each other is a good that we are doing for the entire blanking world, everybody. And I'm going to turn this around again. So those of you who are just joining us, look at this. That rose to your right in the camera right, it was presented to me yesterday by the florist who's just moved in the first floor of the Alba Technique studio here in New York, in Chelsea, New York. So that's in the mid-lower west side of New York, what used to be called Lower Midtown. And so I'm right near Madison Square Garden. Everybody's heard of that. And Penn Station, which is one of the two major train stations in New York City. And one of the two major terminuses on the northeast coast of the United States. So anyway, that's where we are, and it's the floral district. And that flower to your right, that beautiful rose, which has an exquisite fragrance, and breathing in a flower, that old wives' thing, smell the flowers, stop and smell the flowers. That's neurologically a very good thing to do, because if you bring breath in through your nose and you know it's going to be a good smell, that's the catch. You have to know it's going to be a good smell. You give your brain systems the ability to open up. Even if you've got a little bit of allergy stuff, it's good for you. And that rose smells wonderful. And he presented it to me, the proprietor of the flower shop, and he said, I want you to have this rose. It's called Pink Floyd. No, for some of you who are too young, you might not know that Pink Floyd is a famous classic, heavy rock band, Pink Floyd. So that rose is named for the rock band. That is Pink Floyd. And it's a beautiful rose. So that was my uplift for yesterday. That was my little chuckle, and his chuckle too, because of the name, and he would be in my age group, so he would, remember the band, etc. So all of this is good. The other thing that I wanted to bring up to you today, there are two, and so I better get on to the main events for today. Let's see. Let me check my glasses just so that I'm doing this right. Yesterday, it's how we see things, everybody. How do we see things? If any questions come in right now that I will not have time to answer, if that happens, I will answer them on Instagram next week at the same time. But this happened yesterday with one of my longtime students, which is why it's so surprising, because this is a woman who is training to be a teacher with me. And she's also even before that, she was a professional in her own right as a music teacher, a voice. So she knew about breathing, and an actor, a member of the Actors Equity Association, which is the union for theatrical people in the United States. A woman of parts, in other words, in another state. And she was doing with the Alba technique circuit. And what the circuit is somebody who has worked with me long enough that their neural systems can cope with their emotions without getting triggered by lots of things. Or if you do get triggered, you know exactly what's happening in yourself, that know thyself. So she's been at this for a long time. So this was a big surprise to her, an observation that I made about her. So she's taking the circuit, which is like an emotional nautilus. You go from one thing to another in a gymnasium, only it's the gymnasium of your body. So it's great fun for people who have trained enough to do this for themselves. So all she was doing was going from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, like a nautilus, working the upper body and the lower body, that kind of thing, as an analogy. And I, of course, it's on Zoom, because she's in another state, about 2,000 miles away from me. And the view that she was viewing was this. That's why I left it up for all of you today. So she's looking at, it's very important what she's looking at. She's looking at know thyself. She's looking at a rose. She's looking at you are always more, which is me quoting me. And then breathe mindfully. And so she's looking at or through that while she's doing these breathing exercises. And when we started to talk to each other about it afterwards, during analysis, the intellectual analysis of what she was feeling while she was doing that, and it's fascinating, you guys. Your left brain, your prefrontal cortex, as you start to train with me, it doesn't happen right away, but you start to have body memory of what you just done, because it's so different from what would be normal for you to do, and yet you recognize the reality of it because it's real biochemicals. So this whole thing is dead real, which is what makes it so fascinating intellectually for those of us who are, and for the people who aren't as intellectually interested and just want to be able to do things. It's interesting because of the body discoveries that those people make. So it runs the gamut that way, and it's a lot of fun to get to know your neurological self and to be able to adjust it with your own decisions. It's fabulous. It doesn't get rid of any feelings, but you work with yourself. So she's doing that circuit, and we started to talk about it. She said, yeah, you know, when I'm looking at, I'm going to turn it around again so you can see what she's looking at. When I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing, you know, you are enough. And I stopped her and I said, is that what you saw, Amelia? She's given me permission, incidentally, to use this incident with you. I said, let me turn this camera around. And so I turned it around to what you were looking at right now. And she goes, what do you want me to look at, Pat? I said, I want you to tell me where you now see, after having gone through the emotional circuit and having stepped out formally by protocol out of these emotions and gone to neutral emotion and now being normal and talking with me, what you see in green and blue in the center of that picture. And she goes, you are enough. Oh, that's not what it says. I said, read it to me, Amelia. She goes, you are always more. I think this is deeply true. I and you and each one of us are always more. There is a moreness potential in every single one of us. And it causes a lot of problems. We want more of the favorite cake we love to eat. We want more of the feeling we get when we run, if we're a runner, because of the dopamine and the serotonin uptake. You know, all of that. We want more. And I do think that spiritually, I think that the Creator that we're programmed that way on the deepest and highest levels to desire more education, more knowledge, more understanding, more friendship, moreness. And this is one of the cornerstones of Alba technique, is you and me with you discovering through this body work what your individual moreness physically feels like, which is such a fascinating thing. Endlessly, we human beings are endlessly fascinating. And we all have our different histories and our different bodies, so it's all unique, and yet it's also universal. So she and I, because she was seeing, after all the training she's had, she said, Pat, I can't believe that. It's just that I don't know, how come I saw that, Pat? How come, Pat, I didn't see you are always more, and it was right in front of me. Why didn't I see that? I said, because you were doing a circuit, because you'd had a very difficult and stressful day, and it was 6 o'clock in the evening, because you have other stuff to do after you did this other type of body work. All of those things, your body was very, very tense. So it went on a type of a habit. It went into a type of an automatic pilot, if you will. And there is an awful lot of people putting mantras out, and people tape things up on their mirror, like it, so that when they go to shave in the morning or when they first get up and wash their face, they're like, see, you are enough. And that's has been helpful for some people who have, trauma of one degree or another in their past and suffer aspects of shame. And it can be enough, because many of us don't feel like what we are doing is sufficient. We feel insufficient would be another word. And so to look at you are enough is very much out there on the internet. But I say to you that you are enough. While good is mere. It's mere. And quoting myself again, you are always more. And that's in potential. We're not necessarily always acting out of our moreness, because it goes all the way up to the spiritual self. The ultimate moreness is the fact that you're not only your body, that you are all of the aspects of you and all of your experience. And the test, as some people look at things, or the game, is to figure out how to work. My mother used to say this: work with yourself, dear. Stop working against yourself. Work with yourself. Actually, I think I'm going to ask Alex to make a meme out of that, because that's one of my mother's sayings. Work with yourself, dear. So that meant to her, don't beat yourself up, but also be realistic. You know, don't run away from the parts of yourself that aren't so kind of lovely. You know, because which of us is always being real lovely, you know? Especially when other people are being unlovely to us, which in this period of pandemic is pretty frequent. And so that would be one thing. Let me look at my notes so I don't miss any of this, because I do think this is a point. So the mirror is, you are enough. You know, you're sufficient for this, which isn't always true. Really, when you get true with a capital T, I'm not always enough. I mean, my core self is enough, but if maybe I'm not acting out of that, so what I'm doing might not be enough. I might need to push myself a little more. Or conversely, I'm saying to myself, but I need to back up a little bit and let other people have more of their enoughness. So, you know, all the human permutations. So at any rate, I look at that as kind of mirror. Whereas you are more is saying in a way, you are significant. You are irreplaceable. Only you can continue to become you. Who you are has essence before you were born, before you started to effect it. But once you're born, once you're in the world and able to work with yourself, even the challenges, even the other things, other people, ouch, that people are throwing at you, you can deal with it. You have the choice of, if somebody hurt you, you have a choice of popping them one or screaming and yelling at them and all of this. But what my student Amelia saw was that because of her emotions, she didn't see what was right in front of her. So this, you know, that is the objective thing that was right in front of her. It was that. Whereas I like my other finger in the camera. You are always more was what was objectively anybody else other than Amelia would have seen that it does not say you are enough. It says you are always more. That's the objective fact of what's there. But subjectively, she truly saw different words. So my point to you today with all the feels is that your feelings are precognitive, I'm reminding you. So it's before you can think about them. And once you do think about them, you're in the grip of these biochemicals and you can literally see something that's not there. The courts deal with this all the time. It's a cause of a great deal of injustice because neuroscience has only begun over the past 20 to 30 years to begin to even acknowledge that memory is not perfect. There are many, the neuroscientists do not agree about memory. They don't agree about what parts of the brain it comes from. They don't agree about where it's stored. They don't agree about its accuracy. It's particularly a fight right now in regards to people talking about trauma, because there are many people who remember being, say, physically abused or sexually abused. And sometimes well-meaning psychotherapeutic practitioners are, by the nature of their questions, leading people into false memories that feel absolutely real to their brains. And I know of two persons, and we won't get into this, who were falsely accused of sexual abuse. And it was false, absolutely false, in that it was not even possible. And one of these friends actually got convicted twice before finally the verdict, which was a victory for justice in another country, because finally it was seen that it was not possible that it could have been happened the way the accusers said. And so what we feel is so immediate, and what we feel feels so true. But as this thing with Amelia shows, not everything that you think you see is factually accurate. And I want you to think about that. And we all know in conversations with other people, somebody says, well, I remember, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, whoa, I was there at that. Like, what does this person remember? That didn't happen. Yes, it did, because I remember, because blah, blah, blah. And then they'll give you all kinds of surrounding things as if to prove to you that what that individual is asserting is an accurate assertion. And not only accurate, but needs to be defended to the ultimate. But please, it's another aspect of being kind. Another aspect of being kind. Know that all of your feelings, while deeply felt and in your body, are not necessarily correct as you label them to be. So that's the big lesson with all the feels today. And I thank you very much for joining me at Alba Technique for all the feels. And any of the questions that came in today on chat, or that you would like to email to albatechnique@gmail.com, or that you would like to, just to put out there, I will guarantee your anonymity, even your gender, if you like. I other than with Amelia, because she gave me permission, I do that. I usually speak about the querent, the person who has the question. And so I'm just grateful that you were with me. It will also be uploaded on YouTube, if you would be so gracious as to let people know that they can look at it at any time they feel like on YouTube. And that next week I will be on Instagram Live at the same time, answering the questions that we did not answer today. So thank you again, and I'm going to turn it around so that you can see what we were talking about. The mottos of Alba Technique: know thyself. From Socrates, you are always more. From Patricia Angelin, and breathe mindfully and fully, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Signing off today from Alba Technique, and thank you for joining me. I'm Patricia Angelin.